Hello, this is John from keevolveprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at passing objects from a servlet to a JSP file and displaying them using JSTL expression language. So I've got here a bean that I've created, and it's called user, and it follows standard bean syntax. So I've got two properties here, and I've got a default constructor as bean should have, and I've got a bunch of get and set methods for these two properties, and I've also given it a constructor that takes two parameters just for convenience. So I've got a servlet here that I created called pass objects, and here I've got a JSP called receive objects, and pass objects just as a forward here in the get to my receive objects.jsp. And what I want to show you is passing objects from this servlet to the JSP. There's going to be three cases here, they're going to be like request scope, session scope, and application scope. And to demonstrate each of those, I'm going to create three beans here. So I'll have user1 equals new user, and I'm going to give my bean a name, let's say Bob, and a value 1. And let's just copy this and paste in two more. So we've got user 1, 2 and 3, and I'll give these names Bob, Mike and Sue with IDs 1, 2 and 3. Now to set a bean into the request scope, I just say request.setAttribute, and you can set any object, of course, into these different scoped objects, but I'll give this an ID of user1, and I'll pass in the user1 object, and I'm also going to get the session and set an attribute on that. So I'll say request.getSession, and that returns an object of type HTTP session. So I'll say HTTP session equals request.getSession. Let's just copy this. Instead of sending it into the request, I'll set it into the session, and I'll pass in the user2 object with ID user2. And the final case here that I want to demonstrate is the web context. So I can get the web context by using a servlet context type variable, call it context, and I'll set that equal to get servlet context. And then once again here I'll set an attribute, but this time into the context, and I'll call it user3, and I'll set the user3 bean. So I've got three cases here corresponding to request scope, session scope and application scope, which we've already looked at in the tutorial, for example, on beans and scope. And in my receive objects now, I'm going to put some very simple JSTL in here. I'll have some cout tags with a value set equal to some expression language. Let's just close the tag here. So I'll close that tag. And for the value I'll have some expression language stuff. So I'll say dollar and some curly brackets. And let's output user1.name. And in fact I'll just output the names, but you could output the IDs in exactly the same way, of course, because my bean had an ID and a name. But actually, come think of it, you'll see how this works if I just output the names. So I'll stick to that, and let's do that for all three. So user2 and user3.name, and I'll save that, and I'll just clean my project just to make sure there's no caching, and I'll run this pass object servlet, which is now going to forward to this JSP page. And you'll see that now we've got all three objects retrieved. So basically, if you set an attribute on the request, the session or the web context, you can retrieve it in expression language just by using the name of that attribute. And I'm also just going to go show you what happens if I go direct to receive objects. Let's just run this directly without going through the servlet. So we haven't got the request, the first one, which was Bob. We haven't got the request attribute because, of course, I haven't now gone through the servlet. I've gone direct to the JSP, and request attributes only have request scope. But of course, the session and the web context objects, they have session scope and application scope, and so they've stuck around, and they're going to stay around in the first case until the session expires, and in the second case for the duration of my servlet here. So that's it for this tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.